Welcome to our event called Ask Me Anything About Climate Change in Northern Colorado, sponsored by Cooler. Cooler is a National Science Foundation funded initiative aimed at developing a learning ecosystem in Northern Colorado to strengthen climate change resilience. I also want to acknowledge and thank Genevieve for helping out with some of the behind the scenes technology. My name is Kyle Thoutt. I am a student organizer with Cooler. With us today, we have Lorayne. Lorayne is an active member of the Cooler student cohort and a passionate advocate for climate action in Northern Colorado. To start us off, usually we like to ask all our guests how their work connects with climate change. But because you're in such a special position, we wanted to ask what drew you to working with and in climate change?
Yeah, okay. So I'll answer this question kind of backwards-ish. I'll talk about why I chose to go to Northern Colorado and how that ties into my work with climate change. So I'm not from Northern Colorado, and I'm not from Colorado at all. I'm from Hawaii. I'm from the island of Oahu. And the way we experience climate change in islands is very different than what I've learned how people experience climate change on like the continents and stuff. Um, we kind of experienced it not first, but maybe more visibly first. I grew up with like unpredictable weather. I grew up in the mountains, so we got like heavy rains in the summer. We got like crazy floods. I remember in 2021 there was news about the floods in the North Shore of Oahu that was pretty devastating, and I was there watching that happen. And then even when I left for college, there was those fires in Lahaina that was like caused by unpredictable wind patterns, I believe. So when growing up, they tell you there's only so much you can learn on an island, which is partially untrue. It's kind of like a thing about perspectives. So I really wanted to learn about climate change through different lens that I felt like I didn't get living in the islands. So I got the offer from Northern Colorado my senior year of high school, and I eventually decided to go there. I chose the Environmental and Sustainability Studies Bachelor of Arts program, which is in the College of Humanities. So I get to study climate change um, through an ethnographic lens. It's like people and how we like behave. And my primary like studies is how people and climate science interact, how communities build their own resilience, how you can facilitate learning within these communities. Um, and yeah,
Hmm.
that's how I explain myself and climate change and learning. That's how I got to where I am.
I mean, that makes sense. It is definitely a very different environment, um, being pretty much landlocked versus
Yeah.
island climate. So it's got to be a huge difference. And
Yeah.
that's really, really interesting about the environmental and sustainability studies because that's technically what I was doing before I
Oh,
changed
really?
over to geology. Um, and you hit the nail right on the head. It really is just how people interact with our natural resources and
Hmm.
climate and the disasters and yeah, it was some interesting stuff. Really kind of bleak and depressing, but interesting. So, uh, first question I have for you is going to be who inspired you the most in your journey towards environmental advocacy and why?
Um, this is gonna sound like a really cheesy cop out answer, but everybody does. I don't think I've ever met one person who hasn't been affected or knows about the climate. I guess that's telling to the people I grew up with. But if we want to talk about specifics, um, my mom is a science teacher, actually. She's a science teacher in my hometown. And when I was growing up, she taught like marine science, environmental science, like physical sciences. So that kind of interest and always being around like learning spaces was something I was very fortunate to grow up with. I used to go to like work days. I went on like with like nonprofits, like land-based nonprofits. Um, Even in high school, when I took the environmental science and like food science courses, I was never in her classes, but I worked. My teachers were like her coworkers, and I got to talk to her about like what different work means to different people, especially through an educator's lenses. Um, and she's still working in environmental sciences right now, and sometimes she'll call me in college. She'll be like, "Lorayne, this is so cool. This is what we're doing." And I'll tell her, "Mom, this is so cool. This is what I'm reading. This is what my professors are saying." So she's kind of always been like in my corner, inspiring me, and we like the same things. We want to make sure people feel good and educated about climate change and be empowered to what they can do about it. And she's my like role model. I kind of want to like be her, you know?
Hmm. Wow, that's actually really amazing.
Yeah.
And it leads us right into my next question here. Um, so with your mom being in environmental science, what environmental issues resonate with you on a personal level, and how have you approached that in your schooling and within the cohort?
Mm. For me, it's all about making sure people know what they're doing, why they're doing it, or even why things are happening to them. I guess in like higher ed and spaces like that, you use the term DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's pretty embedded into my life because I also work for student services. So I'm reminded about that like every single day. Um, I really want to make sure people are included in spaces that they feel like they historically haven't been included in. I am because I've always been included and invited into those spaces. I don't want people to feel like they don't have a voice and they don't have a voice for change. You know, my like first project idea when we were like first doing the earliest brainstorming, and it might not happen, but um, I've always wanted to like include younger people in my climate conversations, um, like the youth group especially, because they're still like developing feelings and can be very confused, and that's very scary. And a lot of times it gets brushed over, and when they get older it's like, well, why should I care? I was brushed off as a child, no one's going to listen to me now. So I want to make sure that those values and that understanding that yes, you will be heard, yes, you can do something, is told to them early so that they can continue to facilitate that in younger people's lives and continue it through their lives. That makes sense.
That does make sense, and that's actually a really, really noble goal to push for.
Thank
Um, and that also leads us right into this next question here, which I absolutely love. I love how this is all just going one after another.
That's cool.
So how can we better involve people from diverse backgrounds in environmental initiatives?
um let's see. I like to explain through examples. So I did an internship before I came to Colorado. It was called the Hawaii Youth Conservation Corps, HYCC, through a program called Kupu. And I was placed with different organizations through the course of 7 weeks, based around environmental conservation work. And I worked with like a lot of indigenous nonprofits here. And the one thing that they told us, we would always ask him, like, what are you always in need of? What's one challenge you like face? Because that was the work that a lot of us were going into. That's the point of an internship, to understand like the kind of field you go into. And they would always tell us people don't listen and people don't physically show up. Um, and I feel like I've seen that the most. Like no matter what lens or perspective I look at climate change or conservation work or environmental work through, there's always just a lack of people closing their mouth and actually understanding what's being said, because they can't fully comprehend it because they're distracted, or people don't actually care outside of the surface level to put in the work, which is it's like a it's not their fault entirely, but it's also kind of disheartening. So yeah, that's my experience with that.
Okay. That makes sense. And I mean, without going off on too much of a tangent here,
No,
I
please go on.
completely agree with you. Um, but I also kind of think that in today's society, it's kind of set up that
Yeah,
there are so many distractions and people are, clawing and fighting to survive that
exactly.
we can't look at the bigger picture because
Yeah,
it's all day-to-day stuff, which is
yeah.
super unfortunate.
We'll
Um,
get there. We'll get there.
yeah. So what role do you think community partnership plays in achieving climate goals or climate action goals? Sorry.
um, I think that honestly, community goal, well, community as a whole is just the answer. Period. Point blank. Um, I don't think we're ever going to stop running into problems, but there's been kind of like a stagnation, in my opinion, in how we've been solving them. Communities are like the space where you can just kind of do things. And if you mess up, you mess up, and there's people to catch you. And if you do good, you get to spread your wealth with other people. So it's really a place where you can like hone in on everyone's talents, where you can bring your ideas to the table, where you can understand other people's goals, and you can work with like a fully fleshed out, better, more stronger solution to like climate problems and climate solutions. So we're not going to stop having problems, but the way that we approach problems within our communities, um, it's changing, and I think it'll change for the better in the long run. That's what it's looking like, in my opinion, right now. Boom.
Yeah, I would have to agree. There are definitely a lot more like-minded communities who are actually coming together and trying to
Like us,
put
bro.
forth some kind of solution towards, climate change or resilience. Um, and a lot of the solutions that I've been seeing, it's not purely directed at, okay, so we need to tell all these people to change how they
Mm-hmm.
live. It's through, small conversations where
Yeah, 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 yeah,
maybe you get your neighbor to stop watering his lawn
yeah.
3 days a week and he only does it on, Sundays.
Yeah.
So you were talking about the younger generations. Um,
Mm.
how do you think the younger generations are going to change the narrative around environmental issues?
I think mhm. I worked with a lot of kids um, during during the summer. That was one of my other summer jobs. I worked at a pool and I with the swim team. So I got to work with a variety of kids, and they're pretty like spunky, man. They're like they're loud. They're really passionate about what they like. And a lot of like younger generations, I think they're Gen Alpha right now. I think Beta technically just started. They get a lot of flack for being noisy and uncoordinated. And I think that's just the nature of children. Um, so I think that they're gonna have a lot of strong opinions, and they're going to want to start fighting for change earlier. Um, just because they're growing up post COVID, and they saw how we couldn't handle ourselves, and how they experienced like a direct consequence of our actions that they had no control over. So I think they're gonna I think they're gonna be loud too. I don't know how driven they'll be for action, but I think at the very least we can count on their voice, and I'm really excited to see what they have to say. And that's all I can say right now because I really don't know. It's kind of all up in the air, in my opinion.
Right. And especially with all of the changes that are happening here in
Yeah.
America.
Oh, definitely.
So I know that like Gen Alpha and Gen Beta, they get a lot of flack for, you know, all the technology, which
Yeah. I
I
think they're gonna use that pretty well.
right, I I'm on the side for technology. Like
Me too.
technology just consistently makes everything so much easier for us, and we
Uh-huh.
are for whatever for whatever reason so resistant to just making our lives easier. Um,
Yeah.
how do you think the use of technology can enhance the impact of climate change?
I think that I think we've developed enough science and enough technology to address individual issues. It's just there's not a lot of harmonious use of it. Like we've developed ways to like what carbon sequestration, like that's pretty sick. And like
Hmm.
this is gonna I don't want to get my words twisted on this, but like bioengineering species of like especially plants to make them resistant. I don't think that there's a one all answer to every climate issue. Like there's one machine that we can plop in every corner of the world um, to solve climate issues in every place. But we have to use what's available and kind of manage it better.
And, you know, that completely makes sense. It really does all come down to how we're managing
Yeah,
the
that's
limited resources that we have.
exactly. I feel like that's the larger issue when it comes to technology. It's not that we don't have anything, it's we don't know how to use it.
Right. I mean, I've seen a lot of really cool inventions, because for a long time I was really focused on like producing energy from the ocean because
Oh, that's
it's
pretty neat, bro.
huge and it's always moving. And aren't we taking advantage of that?
Yeah,
Um,
I
long
definitely relate
story
to you
short,
because I live in that ocean.
there are things that are happening and it's really cool. It's nice to see. Um, so what gives you hope when you think about the future of the environment?
Um, this is gonna sound morbid, but nothing's gonna go back to the way that it was. I have like no hope that we're gonna fully restore anything in like a conservation sense, but I think that's part of the beauty of nature. The world's always changing. It's never going to be the same. It's not the same as it was 1,000 years ago. It's not the same 1,000 years from now. And
I
my
mean,
hope is
it's not
that
going to be the same tomorrow as
exactly
it was today. So,
it's never ever been the same. It's always in a cycle of change, and I think that we just have to marvel in it. We have to take what comes our way, and instead of fighting it, we have to kind of not adapt. I don't want to use the word adapt. Adapt sounds like too too strange.
adapt makes it seem like we're not actively trying to
Yeah,
change the situation.
yeah. And it also makes it sound like we're trying to like change to something we're not supposed to be, even though we're supposed. That's just how it is.
Right.
That's my hope. I don't know. I just we've manufactured a lot of our issues, and it's affecting our climate negatively, like war, resource mongering, and poverty induced by how we stagger our economy. So I think we just need to fix that. Stop manufacturing our problems and figure out how we can do things harmoniously instead of trying to go against a system that isn't in our nature.
I completely agree with you, 100%. Um, we are getting close to time here. So let's go ahead and end off on a couple of, I would rather consider them to be fun questions.
Fun questions. Okay, okay.
Yeah, right? Crazy. Kyle, fun? Get out of
No,
here.
no, no, no. That's not what I meant.
So, what's an unconventional idea you've encountered or thought of that could contribute to sustainability?
Hmm. Unconventional idea. What's a good one? Let me think. Oh, I okay. So it's not what they meant fully, but the way they delivered it. When I worked in that conservation nonprofit, I met someone who was just like, I think we should get rid of bathrooms, and that was what they led with, which was not what they meant at face value. They meant they wanted to redesign and rework how we treat sewage, and instead of treating like it as waste, kind of bring it back into like how it's been like in our like natural ecological systems and kind of like put it back in the earth. But I thought
Hmm.
that was a really funny way of phrasing it initially. I don't want to have bathrooms anymore.
Yeah, that is definitely a weird way to phrase that. That would be a frightening world.
Yeah, but they weren't talking about like not having a system for like human waste or any kind of waste. They were just talking about like changing it. So I was just like,
Hmm.
okay, I get it. I get it. There's a lot of problems and we could restructure it. But wow, out of context, that's just really weird.
I don't know if you've ever done any research or if you've looked into like Earth ships or anything like that. They're out in New Mexico. Um, they have a fully like closed off system,
Oh,
and the water goes from being gray and black water into the like flower beds and stuff. And
no.
that's like all the human feces, and it's really interesting. It's an
Yeah,
interesting
wow.
concept.
Yeah, I think I watched like an episode of something on Netflix. It might have been Down to Earth with Zac Efron, honestly, where they had like a methane extractor in I don't even remember where they were in some part of the rainforest, and they kind of just lived off the grid completely with that methane extractor, and they used it for their farms. Like they picked a cacao bean at the beginning of the episode and ate it at
Hmm.
the end. Like it was one of those like holistic like spaces, and I thought that was pretty fun.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. I'll have to do some research into that.
Yeah, Down to Earth, Zac Efron, season one, probably like episode 5 or 6.
If you could design a dream environmental project with unlimited resources, what would it look like?
Oh, I would. Hmm, I have a lot of ideas. Let me think.
I know
Do
it's kind of a big question to just
that
ask out
is,
of the blue.
I think, uh, I would ecologically restore Palestine. Um, they have a lot of indigenous plants that are deeply tied to their indigenous people that have been completely leveled to the ground. And experts, I think I've seen, have said that the toxins from the buildings that have been destroyed and all of the warfare materials used against those people have degraded the soil and the water systems to the point where like generations to come wouldn't be able to use it.
Hmm.
And that's like really upsetting. And living in Hawaii where that's happened already, where there's already um, indigenous people and species that are completely gone and lost with no record. Um, it's very deep to me, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So if I could, I would give back everything. You know, we're talking
That
about dreams.
that is very noble, and I
That's
would
the
have
first
to
thing I
say
think
that is
about.
a
I don't
very
think of anything else.
worthwhile cause. So,
Yeah, that's how.
um, let's see. So, last question here,
Mhm.
and this kind of is gonna overarch the entire thing, right?
Okay, let's
So,
go. Let's go.
what advice would you give someone who feels overwhelmed by the scale of climate issues?
Um, you're never by yourself. Um, getting stuck in like rabbit holes of, oh, what can I do? Oh, what's going on? Like looking at all of those huge numbers that aren't caused by you is very like overwhelming, and it's kind of like a daunting thing to take on as like one person. Um, but in reality, those numbers weren't created by one person, and those numbers won't be solved by one person. So the most comforting thing to me as like a single independent student living far away from home, um, is knowing that I'm really not alone. I have my family here. I have my friends there. Like there's cooler. There's like-minded individuals. There you guys aren't even like like-minded individuals. I'd say you guys are closer to my friends than anything. So yeah, it's I don't I there's a lot of doom and gloom when it comes to climate change, and I think you mentioned that earlier. Which is weird because I kind of don't feel that anymore. I feel more hope, and I think that's where you find your own strength is in other people. So yeah,
That that actually makes sense. That also
yeah.
ties everything up really nicely. We brought it right
I'm
back
glad.
around to building community, so
Yeah,
love it.
basically. Cool.
Well, thank you so much for being on today, Lorraine.
Yeah, thanks for the patience, man. I know that was kind of crazy. Oh, there's another car. Good morning. Yeah, I hope that this recording or not recording, this like the ambiance worked a little better than our first
Oh,
attempt.
this is gonna be great. It was gonna work out no matter what. So,
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
not a problem. Thank you, and I hope
Yeah,
you have a wonderful day.
you too. And
All right.
Happy New Year, belated New Year.
Oh yeah, you too.
Okay, well, I'll be
Alrighty.
going now.
Bye.